Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
Hi, Court.
Hey, guys.
Hi, Court.
Okay, so I'm going to do a brief introduction of who Court is in case you wondering who we're saying hello to. So Court and her wife, Nick, are a married couple that have two beautiful children, Finn and Parker. You may hear little bits of them in the background, which I actually think adds to the ambiance of the real life that we are all living right now. This is real. And they blog and are on social media under the name Modern FImily. For those that are listening and obviously can't see this, it's a play off of family and fi, so financial independence. So for those who need me to connect the dots for them. And they have an amazing story. So they've reached financial independence as a family of 3 back in 2018, and then they re-reached it as a family of 4. They also have some fun facts we might get into around how they both played Division I college ice hockey at different competing schools in different states and did not meet until much later, or somewhat later. And just have some really cool stories. Live in Canada, and I'll turn it over to you. We have 50% of the Modern FImily. Actually, that's not true. We have 25% of the Modern FImily with us today with Court. So Court, thank you so much for being here.
It's the basic math that we're good at.
I know math
show.
always throws me off, but thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for that intro. Yeah. We're excited to be here. Let's chat.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to just in terms of background information, anything else you want to tell us about yourself before we jump in?
I'm sure. So I was born and raised in the States, and back in 2015, we moved up to Canada. So Nick's originally from Canada, came down to the States for hockey on a scholarship for school, was there working for a couple years, and that's when we had met. And then we both decided to move up to Canada. So we have a little bit of ties in both countries, which makes our numbers and everything unique, have accounts all over the place. But yeah, we have a 3.5-year-old and a 3-month-old. So life is hectic and crazy. And we just basically transitioned from employees for a corporate job to the hardest job in the world as full-time parents, which is 24/7, especially at this age with them. So yeah, we don't feel retired by any sense of the terms, but it's a job we both really are excited to be taking on right now.
Yeah. Well, imagine doing your corporate job and trying to raise those 2 kids, which, the average person is doing. It's tough.
We say, I think it's daily, if not weekly. We're like, how do people do this when they're working, or even just one spouse off? We can't fathom how tough that is.
They're stressed. They're outsourcing things. They're not always super happy. They're not present. Because I could say that. I'm not talking about other people. I can say that because I've been there myself.
So speaking of raising kids and how difficult it is, and your kids are now growing up in a very interesting environment where you've achieved financial independence and they're going to grow up with that. But part of the story, I think, is about your childhood and how you were raised financially. And this is how we like to start all of our interviews. So could you tell us a little bit about how you were raised financially and otherwise, in case there's any other details you want to add, and how that has impacted your life thus far?
Yeah, I'm pretty much a complete 180 now from how I was raised in childhood. So it's not like I was given all these tips and advice of saving money and doing this to become financially savvy and reach financial independence. It was pretty much the exact opposite. We lived in a pretty upper middle class lifestyle. My parents my dad would say, there's other ways to invest for a child's education besides a 529 or something like that. And then by the time school came, there was nothing to be said for that. So, it's very different in regards to how we're currently living. I saw my parents make a whole bunch of money mistakes, especially in my later years. And I think that was kind of the impetus for me to say, I want to be in control of money and not the other way around. So I think being exposed to seeing a lot of things happening from bankruptcy and foreclosure and things along that line, I realized I did not want that life and that lifestyle. So that's what triggered me when I came out of school with $65,000 in student loans. I wanted those gone right away. So I didn't really know what to do from an investment side of things. I just knew I didn't want to have any debt to my name. So it took me 2.5 years, but within the first 2.5 years after school, I got rid of those loans. And then it was like, okay, that money was coming in via a paycheck and being sent somewhere else, in this case, the student loan. So I was used to not living on my full salary at that point. So then it was like, okay, well, let me put that money to use somehow else. So at that point, I had bought a townhouse, and it was way bigger than I needed, but purposefully bought it thinking we could have roommates. And thanks to the roommates paying a whole bunch of extra on top of what the mortgage cost was, the mortgage was gone in 2.5 years. And then is when the investment side really ramped in. At that time, I was putting about 10% towards my 401k during those years, while aggressively paying off the student loans and the mortgage. And then around that time is when I got exposed to Mr. Money Mustache and the simplicity of, investing and how you can invest simply in index funds. And then I really ramped up that side of things. So I was always having my money work for me somehow, whether it was towards the debt or towards the mortgage or towards the investment side. But I realized from my parents, like, what not to do, I guess.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And so you mentioned Mr. Money Mustache, and one of the things I really wanted to get a sense of, and it may tie back to him, is, what initially inspired you to even know that FIRE was a thing, or that you wanted to take this unique path in life to get to financial independence so you could have the lifestyle that you guys are having now?
Yeah, so when I first started with the student loans, had never heard of financial independence or Mr. Money Mustache or anything like that. This was at the beginning of 2009. I just knew I didn't want the student loans. So at that point, I was just kind of on my own doing this thing. And then it was around 2011, 2012, a coworker of mine introduced me to Mr. Money Mustache. And that is around the time that I had bought the townhouse. So I was already saving up for the townhouse, basically around when I was introduced to Mr. Money Mustache. And then I was like, oh, okay, I found my people. Because I was already living like a very frugal lifestyle. I was at the time, I was living right across the street from work. I had roommates in the apartment that I was living in prior to the townhouse. I had purchased a used scooter, and I would just scoot around. This was in Florida, and I would just scoot around everywhere, like ride, roller skate over to the beach. I was less than a mile to the beach, and just kind of hung out, happy hours, potlucks, things like that. That was the lifestyle I was already living. And then when I found and discovered Mr. Money Mustache and went down that rabbit hole and learned about, all the other people in the financial independence space at that point, I was like, oh, okay, this makes total sense to me. Yes. Like, it wasn't like, ooh, okay, if I have to do this to get there. Like, I was already doing a lot of these things. And it was very helpful from the investment side, because I really didn't know what I was doing besides putting something into a target date index fund in my 401k at that point. So that really helped to, clarify and simplify things from that end for me.
It's an interesting story. And I think a lot of people can relate to it, how there is some small impetus for you to start changing your behavior, and then the momentum builds and you get better and better, and then you get introduced to something, and then you find this new purpose.
Yep.
Before you get to your question on the point about found your purpose, I love, Court, when you said I found my people. Right? Because I think that's just such when you find that community, I think it supercharges what you're doing. Sorry, I might keep going.
So you talked about paying off the student loans and house hacking with the roommates and otherwise living a generally frugal lifestyle. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what else you did after discovering Mr. Money Mustache, perhaps as it relates to like growing your net worth?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, like finding your people, finding your community, it just leads to further and further optimizations, because you see like, oh, you get exposed to this new blog or this new podcast, and they are doing this way. So certain things from the investment side was really taking advantage of the different tax advantage accounts. So in the States, 401k, IRA, And then from like a frugality standpoint, it was like I got really into travel hacking with credit cards. So that was really the goal at the start of all of this, was to be able to feel comfortable where we can quit our jobs and travel for a year. That was kind of the motivation at the beginning years before kids came. And so we got into travel hacking. We had traveled to 25 different countries. We now have over 1 million travel points between the two of us and counting. Now with COVID, it just keeps growing because we're not traveling anywhere. But that was kind of the goal. So we got really into travel hacking and learning about those through different blogs, and then just figuring out how to continue to cut costs, but not depriving yourself along the way. So for example, figuring out different cell phone providers out there or different internet services, that you're still getting what you're looking for, but at a much lower cost involved. So your savings rate is able to increase, but you're not changing really your lifestyle that much in those regards. And then, other things would be like, we would figure out, we can just volunteer to go to this music festival, volunteer for the first 3 hours, the day before the concert starts. And we get in for that day, like opening day, that evening, and another day for free. So we would do that every year when the festival itself would cost, say, $200 each. We're now saving $400. We would purposely volunteer in the VIP section. So we're like right in the front. Like we were very strategic about things.
It's an awesome idea. I'm going to steal from you.
That one.
Yeah. I go buy the VIP tickets. I love I'm going to go volunteer in the VIP section. It's probably fun to volunteer too.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike's just too cheap to go at all.
I know, it's my aversion to people in general. Money and people.
But I love you're just continuing to cut costs, but not depriving yourself. Like that's such a creative way with the concerts is a great example. But keep going. I love where you're going.
Yeah, but there's so many things you can do day to day. Like you can have people over to your house instead of going out to a bar or restaurant. Like you can host people, whether it's for drinks or for food or whatever. Again, this is all, in a non-COVID setup, right? But your socializing and connections is so important. So you don't want to cut those out at any cost. It's just figuring out how to do them at a much lower cost. So when we were in Florida, we would meet up at the beach. Now we're in Canada, we'll go for a hike or we'll go to a park or we'll go camping instead of getting a hotel somewhere. And it's way more like it's more memorable that way because, you're setting up the fire and you're staring at the stars and all these things that you wouldn't be doing if you're just not saying hotels are a bad thing, of course, but just to change up the norm from your day to day and just switch things up at a low cost way of doing things, like have a bonfire. Like there are parks, we have one in our backyard now, but there are parks all around our town where you could just bring some wood and set up a fire. So go do that sometimes, if you're at a restaurant, get something to go. So you're not having to pay, the extra for tip and everything, and go set it up at a picnic sometimes. Like these are just one-off things that you can do that are only, a couple bucks here and there, but it's more for the memories on top of it, on top of the savings as well. I mean, there's so many things that you could do. I mean, the big three, of course, are housing, transportation, and food, and figuring out how to reduce those costs, right? So we did the house hacking, like we said, with our townhouse, which has basically eliminated our housing expenses from when we sold that townhouse to bought a townhouse up in Canada. Now that's completely paid off. We're renting that out, and the rental income is paying for our mortgage at our primary residence. So it's been the gift that keeps on giving, really, for us there. Cars, we've drive used, reliable cars. Right now, we're shifting to a one-car family now that we're not working at this point. So that's savings, from mileage and insurance and gas and all that stuff. And then for food, we buy in bulk. We have a deep freeze. So we're terrible at meal plan. That's the one thing that we're really trying to get better at. But we look at flyers, we shop for sales. Like up here, there's an app called Flip that basically has all the flyers online. We have
the same thing. It's great.
Okay. Yeah. And you could just circle all the things, and okay, at this store, we're going to get this, and this store, we're going to get that. Right. And it's like when we see bacon is on sale for half off, we get 18 packs of bacon and it goes into our deep freeze. We are those weirdos that will get when cheese is half off, we get 6 blocks of cheese, things like that we know, things that we know will last. Right. So all these things are just little ways to hack life. But again, not depriving yourself. You're not saying I'm going to give up cheese because it's so expensive, I know that every month it goes on sale. So when it goes on sale for that week, I'm going to stock
You're
up.
not going to deprive yourself of cheese. You're going to get 500 pounds of cheese.
Exactly.
Do the opposite. I love some themes, Court, and what you were just saying around not depriving yourself, but also hacking life, right? And I think I love the word hack because I think when people think about saving money or being frugal, which Mike and I are both pretty frugal, people often who aren't in that mind space think of it as deprivation and they don't want to do it. And they're like, I work hard. I want to enjoy, whatever the reasons are. But I love the spin on even calling it like hacking life, because you're hacking, you're still eating, nice bacon and cheese, whatever makes you happy. Right. Mm-hmm. But you're doing it in a way where you're kind of like beating the system and able to it's like life hacks, right? Exactly. It's kind of a positive spin for anyone who thinks of anything like that as deprivation.
Exactly. And they're all like little wins for us. Each time we're like, oh, whoa, we just saved, whatever it was on whatever activity that we just figured out. It's like, that's a win. And not only was a hack because we're now like, not depriving ourselves and still able to do what we want to do, but it's kind of a boost of confidence that like, hey, we just figured this out too. Or, oh, did you realize that we could do this? And the more and more you talk to like-minded people, which is why I started my blog, is you are more exposed to so many more of these creative things that other people are coming up with too. And you're like, oh, okay, how can I apply that to my life? And each time you figure out how, you're like, oh, this is awesome. We can just now, like, for example, one of our fire friends that lives nearby us in Calgary, she was a dentist and she just sent us, this was just last night, sent us a flyer of a dental school around here that does everything but cleanings, basically like x-rays, sealants, fluoride, whatever, for $10. Wow. So so we were going back and forth about self-insuring or getting insurance plan for dental once we're off an employer coverage. And now like, well, if all we have to pay for is cleaning and like the basic cleaning and everything else can be covered for $10, like that's a win right there. Multiply that for 4 once we have the kids getting them annually or semi-annually as well. That's a large savings, all these little things. And it says, the downside is you have to be able to allow 3 hours for this because they are being trained by actual, dentists and hygienists. But the beauty of fire is like, okay, 3 hours on a Wednesday morning.
You've got the time. Yeah,
exactly.
And you're doing a good deed in a way too, of like, they need to learn, right?
Exactly.
So it's funny you say that because my wife just forwarded me a flyer about the same dentist school type setup. And she's like, we should do this. It's so cheap.
Yeah.
It's cool. I didn't know they had that here. I have done massages at a massage school and it is like a third, maybe 25% of the price. And I'd argue just as good a quality. And like you said, sometimes there's someone else in the room that's coming in and doing some training, but you can train all you want while you're massaging my back, right?
You're so fancy, Maggie. You're frugal on your full body massages once a week.
I know. I don't get a massage once a week, Mike. Come on. That would be nice. It's right by you, by the way, the massage school. So the thing I was going to say earlier when you were talking about that is it almost sounds like, there's so many people and there's a lot of research behind this that you get like a short-term temporary like dopamine hit from shopping and the pleasure of buying something. And then it goes away like very quickly. But you almost get that. And I agree. I get the same feeling from finding a good deal and finding like you got excited when your, former dentist friend sent you that thing and you realize you can do something and save some money here. And so I think it's just cool, the idea that you can get the same amount of pleasure from saving money and being cost conscious as you can from spending money.
Exactly. And like another example of this is we've been looking to sell our cars and purchase a single car after we sell our 2 cars. And we know we're not in any sort of time crunch to do any of this. And so Nick is like a shark when it comes to this. She's got all the alerts up and, the certain cars that we're looking for, the different varieties. And we've been keeping a spreadsheet of when good ones come up so we can get an idea of, mileage and cost, what's a good price, what's not a good price. And she saw one, whatever it was, a week ago, and we jumped on it and went and saw it. And because we had the time, basically the guy he pulled the ad. He was getting so many requests because of this crazy car market that we're in. And we went and saw it the next day because we could, and we got it inspected and ended up purchasing it. And it was a huge win for us. And these are all like, we were so excited to spend money on a car because we knew that this was such a great deal.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like once you find those good deals, it's like, yeah, it's so rewarding to know like, okay, because we were patient, because we took the time to research about it, we know that we are getting a good deal here. We know we're not getting, we're just having to settle because our car broke down and we need something immediately type of thing.
So you, along these same lines, you have a quote you say on your blog, or there's a line you say, and I want to ask a question about it, but you say, we've escaped from the crazy consumeristic world we live in and realize that a happy life does not have to be expensive. And I love that phrase. And Mike and I are, full believers and agree with you. At what point did you realize that you did you have that realization? And did you realize that you don't need certain types of things to be happy?
I think it was a long time ago, honestly. Like I was working in corporate America with people that were driving, BMWs and living a very lavish lifestyle. And you see that they're complaining about work and money and all this stuff, but they're making good wages. So I'm like, wait a second, something's broken, something's wrong here. If you are making like well above the national average for income, but you're still complaining about, your kids' activities are costing this, or your car payment is this. It's like, well, why are we doing this? What is this work spend, cycle that we're living in? So seeing that, I think, was really kind of like the spark for me to be like, why are we all living this crazy lifestyle that just doesn't make any sense to do this for 40 years or however long your career is, 30, 40 years, just to reach 65. And now like we are seeing firsthand all of the different issues that are coming up with our parents and our extended family that are in their 60s. Like there are so many health issues that can come up that early. Like you think, oh, old age isn't until you're 80, 90, but we're seeing firsthand, what's happening to our own family in our 60s. So the idea of working this grind for 20, 30, 40 years, just to then have to deal with, knee replacements and open heart surgeries and all that. It's like, that sounds terrible, like, so
it's not the American dream.
No.
Or the Canadian dream.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we spend less than $30,000 a year for our family. So we know we could be spending a lot more than that. And our numbers say that we can, but we just feel like, how could we even spend another $20,000? That to us is like beyond mind boggling to us for like how we've set up our life. Like, so we enjoy going for walks. We go for hikes. We have forests and rivers and pathways all across our town. So we make use of them. The library is free, but there's so much more than just books at the library. We go for kids activities like story time. There's a yoga class for kids. There's a mindfulness class for kids. There's different craft activities going on. We're able to get more than books. We can get puzzles and different kits for kids. We're able to get tools. There's there's snowshoes, there's hiking poles, there's all sorts of things that our library offers that are way more than books for free, right? So there's so many ways that you can just lower your expenses, but you're still having a very enjoyable day. And I don't think we should be cramming our days with so many activities too, whether it's for adults or kids, in both respects. I think we need downtime. I think we need time to just sit and reflect and just meditate, look out the window, things like that we don't ever have enough time for, that are so good for our soul, but no one ever seems to have enough time for it. Just getting out for a walk by yourself without a podcast, without anything in your ears, no phone on you, like all those things cost no money, but are so good for you. But we just feel like, oh, I don't have enough time for it. I'll do it, next week. I'll do it next month once I have time. And we never end up finding the time because we're spending our money on other things instead. So, I mean, there's so many different ways to have a meaningful life without having to break the bank on it.
It's so interesting to hear you rattle off all of these very intentional lifestyle decisions that you've made. And one thing that I've noticed is that on every single one, you've said we, either for you and Nick or you and your family of four. So I think it's safe to say that you two are on the same page right now about most, if not all of this stuff. But I'm curious, like, was it always that way? And have you two evolved your beliefs over time?
Yeah, good question. We are very unique in that this was not a one-sided realization that we had to try and convince the other to join the party type of thing. So I'm definitely way more, I'm the number cruncher, the spreadsheet doer. Like I am on top of everything in terms of finances, but lifestyle wise, like we are right there hand in hand with each other. So Nick grew up in a very, I think I would call it like a modest, frugal lifestyle. So none of this came off as like a shock to her. And like, for example, when we first met, I didn't even realize this until a couple of years later, but when I came up to visit her the first time, she was living in Boston, and she had a mattress right on the floor, like no bed frame or anything like that. And I didn't realize this, but she had told me later on that she had just gotten a mattress like before I came up to visit. Like she was sleeping right on the floor for a time while she was still like in between traveling, moving, and trying to set things up from her end. Like, so I mean, that's an extreme, obviously, right? Like that's not her normal, but I mean, that just shows that she wasn't like living this, spend lifestyle. She knew she was on a limited budget at that time, limited income. And so she was making it work on what she had. So when I introduced her, to the idea of FIRE, again, it was all travel oriented for us at the beginning. We were all like, yeah, like this sounds great. Let's just figure out how we can save up enough to then go travel the world. To us, that both clicked, that both resonated. It was a huge motivator for both of us. And now that we had kids, the intention when Finn, our daughter, was born, the thought was she was going to go back to work after parental leave. In Canada, it was 18 months. So it's a little different than in the States, but she was off for 18 months with the intention to go back to work. And then we ran some numbers, and we're like, this doesn't even make sense. She didn't like her job. She was a nurse and it was very stressful. And for the pay versus what we were going to have to shell out on childcare or not see each other because we both worked shift work, it just didn't make sense. So many of the different things along the way just made sense to both of us. We didn't have to sit down and have a conversation, or I didn't have to send her some books and be like, so what'd you think about that book? Or what'd you think about that blog post? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying to nudge her. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, yeah, it makes sense. Neither one of us loved our jobs like that much that we wanted to be doing it for the next 30 years. That if there's a way to not have to do that, yeah, we were both on board from the get-go. So yeah, I don't really have much advice on like how to convince a spouse because there wasn't much convincing going on.
Yeah, we've done some episodes and get a lot of questions from people who do need to convince their spouse and bring them along. And not even just on like a FI, which is a, very, I wouldn't argue extreme because we're on the same page, but to many people is extreme or out there. But just even having like basic day-to-day functioning discussions about money is challenging for many couples. And so I always think it's amazing. And Mike and I are similar in that we also have partners that are on the same page in different ways and kind of gotten there in different journeys. But it is so enjoyable and amazing to be on this journey of life, but also the journey from a financial perspective with someone who is like-minded and committed to the same things and has the same values.
Exactly. It's not like I ever have to be like, so I need to see the credit card balance for the month. What happens? We never, like everything's shared between us. Like there's no questions of like, oh, if she goes to wherever, is she going to go to this store and spend, $500 on shoes today? Like that's never, ever, ever crossed either of our minds. Like we are both very much savers in terms of, personalities. So to us, like we see the numbers when you play with a compound interest calculator. It's just crazy when you're like, okay, if I spend, $500 this week on whatever it may be, if we just wait 10 years, we can spend $10,000. I'm just making these numbers up, $10,000 instead of that 500 and have a wait, like have 9,500 remaining. I'm exaggerating those numbers, but you know what I mean? Like you can play with calculators out there. And you're like, how powerful your future money is. And that's just such a big motivator to not spend money. But then I think there's, you have to understand like the difference of frugal and cheap, that like there is a difference between the two. And it is important to spend money on things that you do value. So we're not saying like cut out everything completely, but if you can figure out like how powerful compounding is in the future, that is a huge motivator when you can see like, then you realize, okay, we were spending, $50,000, let's just say, how do we get this to 45,000? And then when you go back to the hacks that we were talking about before, you just get more and more interested in like what optimizations are out there. So that way you can increase your savings rate by an extra $5,000. And then the next year you do it again. And now you've saved $10,000 from your starting point, and you go on and on and on. And then you realize like, okay, now that we're spending 40,000 instead of that 50,000, do a reassessment. Like, okay, is it worth that extra $10,000 each year? Like, were we happier before than how we are now? And I'm going to guess more likely than not, you're going to be like, no, we're actually happier. Our bank account is, way more improved than where it was last year. And we figured out that we don't need to be spending that $10,000 on whatever it is, decide instead of having, Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu and Amazon Prime, pick one,
one at a time. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's so many little things out there that you can do to test things, like test it out for a month, test it out for a year. And you can always reintroduce things that you realize, okay, that was a little too extreme for us. Let's bring this back.
So speaking of things that you value, you've referenced yourself as a valuist. Yeah. What does that mean?
It's a made-up term.
I like it, though.
What does it mean to you, then?
Yeah, it's basically figuring out what it is that you value, not what society tells you should value, not what your parents or your friends or your siblings or anyone else, except for you, what it is that you actually value. Do you value your time? Do you value a fancy car? Do you value eating meals out? Do you value a home cooked meal? Like whatever it is, figure out what it is that brings you that joy and the things that you value versus other things that you're like, oh, I can use brand name versus or store name versus brand name for this. There are lots of things out there for us that like we don't care about the brand name of certain things. So we don't value that brand per se. So things like that, you figure out what it is that you value, and then you literally cut out the fluff because the rest is fluff. Society and the world and marketing and advertising is going to tell you that you should be having a new car every 5 years, or that you should have the highest luxury brand furniture so that way your house looks super chic and in style. Like, is that actually bringing you value each time you sit on that couch? Do you think I think I did not need that $3,000 couch? I probably could have done with the $500 one. These are things, everyone's values are different. So I can't tell you how to apply this to you. Like you need to go through an assessment yourself and figure out, all the things. I would look at everything that you spend your money on, which you should be tracking your expenses, which is like step number one, which I don't think a lot of people do. I think they, just downplay it. It's like, oh, it's not very important. Like I know what I spend, I spend like, $70,000 a year, but where's that money going? And then when you see like, oh, so much of it is going to our mortgage for our house, but 30% of the rooms are never even used. Well, is that something you value? Can you downshift to a house that's a third of the size and save that money instead? Like things like that is where you can apply this, valuist mentality to figure out, is your spending in line with what you value?
So I love that. Oh, you were saying that you love it too, Mike. Sorry, it was jinx, double jinx. So I'm curious what advice you have, because this is something that people have actually said to me when I'm having conversations about money and values and minimalism and just having less stuff and spending less money. What is your advice to people who, when you just describe what you described about being a valuist and what it means to you, who would say, well, I value everything. I want the fancy car. I want I'm just curious, like what is, or do you just sort of like, I'm never going to convert that person, right? We're just different.
Likely. But I mean, you can always start somewhere. Start with one thing. Let's say someone says, I need Starbucks every day. I really value my Starbucks. Okay. Well, could you opt for a smaller size? Maybe start with that. Or could you try doing it every other day and making your own drink, on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays? Or could you say, I'm only going to go out for coffee if I'm meeting someone and having an actual conversation with someone? I'm not just going to get it through the drive-through just as my morning pick me up to get to the office, because I can make my own coffee at a fraction of the price. And this actually takes a lot less time because the drive-through at Starbucks takes 20 minutes. Things like that, where you could just test it. Not saying eliminate things completely, but try and adjust the timeline of things. Maybe you get a massage weekly. We'll try doing it bi-weekly, and then try stretching it to monthly, and then maybe quarterly. Things slowly just stretch the boundaries of things, and then either eliminate it completely if you realize like, oh yeah, I didn't really need that weekly massage, or, do it quarterly instead of weekly. And you actually will realize that you can savor it and look forward to it more if it's not as consistent. When it's consistent and just becomes routine, it's a habit, you don't really cherish and savor those moments. Whereas if it's, let's say this massage example, if you were doing it weekly, it's like, oh, I have my weekly massage every Monday. After work, I go over and get my massage done. Whereas if it was quarterly, it's something that you can actually look forward to. And that, like what we were talking about before with, with the hacks and getting excited for these things, this is something that you would actually look forward to versus just something you're used to and expected at that point.
That's funny. By the way, I somehow think that people think I get massages weekly now. I know you're just using an example. I haven't had a massage in a long time.
I like to start these sort of rumors.
I know. That's like a Mike started rumor. But I will say, you want a good massage hack is get your partner to give you a massage. And like get good at and like get some good massage oil. And like, I think we actually put that in like a self-care episode we did once, but and then there's like double benefits to that part too, because it can turn into other things that are also good for your relationship. So, and you save money. It's like we talked about earlier. It's like life hacks, it solves multiple needs in your life. Okay. One question. This is a very selfish question of mine, but I'm super curious about this. So Mike and I are not too far off of retiring ourselves. And as I think about retiring, I often wonder, like, who am I going to hang out with? Because all my friends are still working, and when they're not working, they're pretty stressed. How do you make friends? Like, who do you hang out with? Do you have new fire friends? Well, Mike's pointing to himself. Like, yes, we can hang out with each other. I'm very clear on that.
Maggie, I am right
and you
here.
know what? You're enough, Mike. I don't need anyone other than you and my husband, and I'll be happy. And my family and my kids and all that. But like, who do you guys hang out with? And like, what does your social life look like in this retired state?
Yeah, we're actually a lot busier than we ever imagined or thought we would be. Well, having two young kids, that obviously takes up most of the day and night, let's be honest, right? So like we wake up and next thing we know, it's 8:00 at night and we're like, what did we just do today? Like it wasn't anything crazy, but your day just gets filled up from, a 20-minute bathroom experience, things like that. But in terms of actually hanging out and socializing, so we have our blog, and that has been huge for us. And I think for you guys too, with the podcast, continuing on with that and making connections through people that you interview, and we've met now people that we've had on our blog. Some people have traveled through our town and they've come and we've hung out outside in our backyard. We've hosted them for dinner, had a little like backyard picnic type of thing. This is just September alone. I think we had 5 or 6 different fire related people that we had made connections with over the years, like hang out with us, whether like in our town is only 30,000 people. We're just outside of Calgary. And we started a little FI meetup, which we're actually having in 2 days is our next one, like just a little bonfire outside. The first one we had ended up being 5 hours long, like just getting to know each other type of thing. And so that's huge, like finding people locally. And then we're not far from Calgary, and Calgary has a really big FI community. So different meetups there too. So finding people within the FI community. So finding fire or financially independent friends locally. I mean, it's hard. There's not many of us out there, but once you put yourself out there, you will find people, which we did not think was going to be the case for us. And then great. Our neighbor, 2 doors down, is a stay-at-home parent, and they have a little 4-year-old boy. So our kids hang out all together and we get along with the parents really, really well. So we see them, weekly, like we'll have Finn go over to their house for a couple hours and vice versa. We'll take their little guy and we'll hang out, outside, depending on the weather, of course, we'll all hang out together. So finding neighbors and communicating like that you are like, they just see you, right? Like we chat with each other. Like, I wonder how many of our neighbors realize like that don't work because they see us out raking the leaves at 1 p.m. on a Thursday, then you just run into neighbors and you just start talking and you start connecting that way. And then really, I think getting involved somehow, like we use our library a lot. So everyone knows us there by name. So we just chit chat with everyone while we're there, So, just connecting with other like-minded people. There are there's a hiking moms Facebook group where it's moms from all over that just, throw out, hey, I'm looking to do this hike on Wednesday. Does anyone want to join? And then you can join that.
Yeah. I love that.
Stay at home parents, if you have kids, there are so many. We realize one of our fire friends here has a 3-year-old son, and they are starting this like Friday outdoor gathering where you just go to this like local creek, waterfall, whoever can come. And I think that's what we've realized is there are a lot of people who are off Monday through Friday, whether they are stay-at-home parents or shift workers that don't have the typical Monday through Friday, and they're looking for people to hang out with too during the week. So it is definitely, it's not like we're just sitting at home, twiddling our thumbs, waiting for someone to contact us to hang out.
No, that's awesome. I think there's this part of me that wonders, like, is there something isolating about it? But I can totally imagine everything you're saying, which is kind of like once you're out there and in the world, all these things present themselves that you otherwise were too busy to notice or recognize or even have the time to stop and have a meaningful conversation with someone that you then realize.
Exactly. And it can be a stranger, right? Like you can just randomly go for a walk. And like this lady was walking by our house, and she was a retired lady, and we have a little like swing on rope and just a piece of wood like out on our tree out front. And she asked if she can go on our swing. And so we ended up chatting while she's swinging on her swing, like just random interactions like that, like now, Halloween time, our neighborhood goes all out. There's a cul-de-sac. So we go in the middle of the day when the people are out there, tending to all their decorations, and it ends up turning into a half-hour conversation. So there's definitely ways to interact with people. And the biggest thing for sure, like the biggest shocker for us was realizing how many people locally we know now that are either have reached financial independence or are pursuing it. And you can just talk more openly to those people. And it's so nice to be able to have a conversation about money with people you actually know. So even if it's just one person and you talk with them monthly, like it's amazing. Like just to have that conversation,
That's
so
so
you have
interesting.
to find those people, right? Which takes the upfront work. Like for us, it was starting this blog and connecting with people and then feeling more confident and open to reach out to our town and say, hey, is there anyone around here that wants to meet up? We wouldn't have done that probably unless we had this, backing. But I mean, it's not necessary, of course, right? It just let us feel more confident and comfortable to come out, the closet, so to speak.
Yeah, I love it. Coming out of the FI closet. I love what you were saying, because it's one of the things we've enjoyed about this podcast, right? Is getting to meet and have a conversation with people like you, and you specifically, because otherwise it would be like, couldn't just call you up and be like, hey, do you want to talk? I think we might have similar ideals, and right. Like you need that first kind of thing to give you a reason to want to talk to someone and to start to kind of meet other people in the community, which I think your blog does. And it's one of the things that we love about this podcast is we get to meet and talk to so many like-minded people.
The other thing to that is even you just feel once you've reached like that retirement and you're like, oh, wow, we did it. We were able to do it. We are proof that it worked. We were diligent with our savings and investing for the last 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it took, right? And you realize like this is possible. You kind of feel like you want to share that knowledge with people who aren't there and you see are struggling, especially people that you do know, whether it's friends or family. And I think you start to feel more comfortable and confident, just, hinting things like, if like our neighbors, for example, they did ask us, they're like, so are you like independently really wealthy and you just don't really know about it? I'm like, well, kind of, like you feel awkward, but now she wants me to coach her and she's like really engaged and interested in it. And then it's rewarding for you because ultimately we're just trying to help people, right? Like that is our goal. And I'm sure for you guys too, with this podcast is just showing the world.
Yeah, you want to spread the happiness you found, that there's a different, better way to live.
Exactly. So then you start to open up a little bit more. Like we've opened up with friends and family, and whether like we can't push it, right? Like they have to be wanting it themselves, wanting to learn more. But for the, 10% of the people who do want to learn more, that's fulfilling too in your like post-retirement world as well. It's just like, you have this time, like, come on over, we'll chit chat, I'll talk to you about the basics and then we'll dig deeper and, next time we chat. And that can just lead to this, trickle down effect of helping other people, which boosts them and you at the same time, So it's a win-win for everyone, really.
Yeah, it's incredibly rewarding. I found those discussions with other people in the same way that, when I first met Mike, it was very rewarding, the discussions we would have. Okay, so we really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I'm going to wrap it up with a quick question. If you could put, if I gave you a billboard in your hometown or in whatever city you would like, what message would you put on that billboard that you want to share with the world?
Oh boy, this is a good question. Let's see. I would say something. I'm not good with my words, so it's going to come out as a paragraph, and we have to.
It could be a video billboard.
I need an
the same way
to work with me here. Yes, I think it would say, figure out, is your money going out in line with where you want to actually be spending your money? Figure out, is time your most important resource, which it likely is, and prioritize that. So here it is. Prioritize your most precious resource, time.
I love it.
Time.
I love it. I love it with the punctuation included. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, Court, thank you so much for coming on today. We've so enjoyed this discussion. And I just think, I think everything that you have shared today is incredibly inspiring and approachable for people to hear how you've gotten where you've gotten with your wife and with your kids, and just how happy you are and the choices you've made, and kind of, the pleasure you get from some of the life hacking and frugality and other things, and the lifestyle that you all have been able to create is just beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. That's true. It's just opening up choices and options and freedom for us. If we want to go work part-time, we can go work part-time somewhere. We're not saying we have to never, ever work again. It's just giving us the freedom and the flexibility to decide what it is that we actually enjoy, because we now have the time to think about it and go and pursue those hobbies, whether or not they make money or not. And I think a lot of people strive for that, and they want that, but they just feel so strapped for time that they never ever get there until it's too late. So yeah, we're just trying to hopefully motivate others along on their journey too.
Well, I love it.
Well, that's great, Court. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure. And I feel like you have been kind of inviting us to come visit you in Calgary. And so Maggie and I will definitely be there. Thank you for the subtle invitation.
Yes, you picked up on it. Good.
We'll be there soon out by the bonfire. Thank you so much, Court. Have a great day.
Court.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have thoughts or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram or Facebook.